Welcome to Rerouted, where we tell the stories of people with unique and windy paths to help give you the tools you need to help create a fulfilling career. Today's guest is Dr. Ann Perry Whitmer. Ann started her career as a reporter, but 15 years later decided to return to school for her bachelor's in civil and environmental engineering. Now, she is a professor at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign and a world-renowned researcher. Join us as we talk about returning to school, nearly filed lawsuits against employers, and how journalism and art history has shaped her into the engineer she is today. Thank you for joining me so much today. How are you doing?
Doing very well. How about you, Nick?
I am doing exceptionally as well, thank you. No complaints whatsoever. Do you want to hop right into it?
Let's do it.
All right. So I want to start just asking you, what did you go to college for the first time around?
uh, the first time, way back in the old days, I knew exactly what I wanted to be, and I wanted to be
Okay.
a newspaper reporter just like the guys in All the President's Men. And so after high school, I went to Boston University to get a degree in journalism.
All right. Heck yeah. So you worked as a journalist for a few different publications. What were some of the most memorable moments from your time working as a journalist?
Well, I will say, working as a newspaper reporter has its moments of total exhilaration and thrill, and then it has its moments of absolute sheer boredom and triviality. So
Hmm.
we'll set aside like the lunchtime, Rotary meetings and things like that that I'd have to cover. And maybe some of the more exciting ones were I got into investigative journalism. And when I was working at the Peoria Journal-Star, I was covering federal courts and had come across somebody who was accusing the federal government of reneging on an agreement, ratting somebody else out, for lack of a better term.
Okay.
He was an informant, and he had struck a deal with the government, and he felt they had abandoned him, and he wanted to talk about it. And so he was living down in like Louisiana somewhere. So I flew down to Louisiana and went and visited him. And while I'm there, the repo men are coming in to repossess his kitchen refrigerator and stuff. And he's telling me all about this investigation he was involved in with the federal government. And of course, you know, the government's not going to confirm or deny that this was the case. Um, but it was funny because he said, they're going to be coming after you now, which they didn't. But it was really funny because I'm leaving and I'm driving back to the airport through the bayous, and I see a car go by that has a government license plate, and I'm like, oh my God, they're coming after me. They weren't.
No, no troubles with the government, no run-ins
Oh,
so
I've always
far.
had run-ins with the government, but not over that.
So, despite knowing exactly what you wanted to do when you were going for your undergraduate in journalism and art history, for 15 years after graduating with those degrees, you enrolled in a Bachelor of Civil Engineering program at University of Illinois. What drove you to make that change?
My goal was to work for 10 years in newspapers. Um, I mean, it wasn't my goal to get there and then quit. My goal was to just last 10 years. And at first worked in Pennsylvania at a small newspaper and then moved to Illinois to work at the Peoria Journal-Star, which at the time was a pretty big newspaper. Um, and was covering, like I said, investigative. I did a lot of environmental reporting. I got very into long form journalism, investigations, and things like that. And at the same time, I'm noticing this advancement of USA Today and short form reporting, and was getting told by my editors that 98% of people won't read past the first paragraph of your story. And it, it wasn't something I liked. Certainly if you're very idealistic and you see this as the way to, the support democracy and everything, you start feeling like this idealism is getting shattered by the idea that you have to say it in 5 paragraphs. At the same time, they met the guy that sat at the desk next to me, and after we stopped arguing over who got to use the computer, we ended up getting married. Um, uh, and so I decided to be a stay-at-home mom because I was pregnant with our first child, and um, realized that once like my children were old enough to go off to school, I didn't think I wanted to come back to journalism anymore. Um, and the fact that I had been spending so much time reporting on environmental issues made me think, well, maybe that's the direction I want to go. So I wasn't quite sure where I was headed. I mean, I played with different ideas. I thought about being a veterinarian before the kids came along and I decided there's more important things than my dog. Don't listen, dog. Um, yeah, there's more pressing issues in life. And I come from a family of engineers, so I thought I'll start taking courses and see if I could manage that because you don't take any engineering-based courses in journalism school.
Hmm.
Uh, so before that 15 years, like right after my son was born, I took a college algebra course because I had never taken a real math course and liked it. So kind of kept going and I ended up taking the calculus sequence at the local community college and found out I liked it. And we moved and I started taking chemistry and physics courses and I liked them and looked around and said, I think I want to be an engineer. Where's the nearest engineering school? It happened to be University of Illinois, which is about 45 minutes away from where we lived. So I thought, I can do that commute. Had no idea what this school was like. So
Hmm.
I applied and somehow talked my way in. After I got here, I said, yeah, I'm just going to do this part-time while I'm raising my kids. And they said, oh, no, we don't do part-time. And I said, well, if you want to watch my three kids, I can do this full-time. They're like, okay, do it part-time. Um, so I got my civil engineering degree in 4 years, having already had two undergraduate degrees. It took me 4 years to get that.
What was it like doing an undergraduate degree at this point with three kids doing full time, already having lots of
Yeah.
work experience under your belt? And what were some challenges or areas that you had an advantage in doing it for the second time?
Oh, there were so many advantages, but you can get caught in your own mind and see all the negatives first. Like I had people telling me, "Oh, it's going to be so hard going back to school at your age. You're out of practice studying, and that's going to be awful." And when I went to pick up my registration on campus, I got told that I was in the wrong line, that the parents were supposed to go to another line. Um,
Hmm.
and students need to pick up their own. And I'm like, I'm the student. So I kind of went into it saying, oh, this is going to be tough. Everybody's going to be looking at me like I'm different. And it was all in my head. So once I got going, I found out that the discipline that I don't think I would have had 15 years before was there now
Mhm.
because I had to be a time manager because I knew I was going to go home and have three other people plus my husband, expecting me to do things. So I had to be
Yeah,
really, really deliberate in what I was doing. And it ended up being just a fabulous experience, to be honest. I had so much fun. I loved being in classes with 18-year-old students when I was 38. People were genuinely kind. I picked up very little as an undergraduate. I picked up very little. Oh God, I don't want to be in her group type thing. Or the smelly old lady in the corner type. Yeah, I didn't get that perception at all.
good.
Um, so the challenges I think were all self-made. And once I got past the mental thing of people are always going to be saying, "Oh, you're in the wrong place." Once I got past that, I just had a great time.
That's awesome. Was it I know that I'm actively in my undergraduate and some of the really defining parts are for me are the organizations that I'm a part of and the friends that I'm making. Were there any sort of drawbacks that you faced there or were you able to still connect people socially?
No, and that's a good point. That is the one thing that I didn't participate in, but I didn't need it because
Sure.
I had done it as an
Yeah.
undergrad.
Yeah.
And as a 38-year-old, I'm not going to shove my way into a group of people, you know, um,
Yeah.
for whom I could be their mother. It was a different experience. I was living 45 minutes away, so I would come into town for classes.
Hmm.
My older two kids were in like kindergarten and first grade by that point. My younger daughter I brought over to Champaign to go to the child development lab. So she went to school while I was in school. And then we'd beat it back home. And there wasn't much of a connection to Champaign at the time.
Sure.
Um, but I was okay with that because I was in a different stage in my life, and I really just wanted to get through the schoolwork and the books and be ready to have a job when I got done.
Yeah. Awesome. So speaking of job when you get done, what were like some of the challenge that you faced entering the water resources civil engineering world?
Yeah,
Did you ever have any moments of doubt?
I had so many moments of doubt, and it was odd because the way I described when I was a student, I just felt very welcomed and very, very able to be a part of everything. The first engineering job I took, and I will say this is not the way all engineers are. I just happened to choose a workplace that was not a good fit for me.
Hmm.
Um, and they were as opposite my undergraduate experience as you could get. They
Hmm.
essentially introduced me as the stay-at-home mom who thinks she's an engineer. And
Hmm.
it was incredibly difficult because to that point, I was as a newspaper reporter, I was pretty successful. As a student, I was very successful. I'm and I'm an optimist, so I always kind of see the good stuff and feel like I'm doing well. To come into a place where people have already passed judgment that I wasn't a good fit and I probably was faking it was just incredibly difficult for me.
Yeah.
And I really put the first year or two working in engineering as the lowest point in my life because I'd never dealt with that level of discrimination. Um,
Yeah.
and it wasn't, I actually had a conversation with HR about this as I was threatening a lawsuit. Um,
Okay.
it wasn't, and it turns out I learned from an attorney friend of mine, it was probably the worst thing I could have said. It wasn't discrimination because I was 40 years old at the time, and it wasn't discrimination because I was a woman at the time. It was discrimination because I was different from them.
Mm.
I had a different background. I dressed differently than most. There was a dress code. They actually had a dress policy that was like right out of the 1950s, and so
Mm.
I would intentionally find every way I could subvert that dress code. And there are all kinds of codicils in the dress code now that essentially are labeled the Witmer codicils because they had to make new rules because I found ways around them. Leather Chuck Taylors with stiletto heels are neither sneakers nor cotton material. So they had to put a special rule in for that. But yeah, it was really hard, and it was doubly hard because I was never really given the chance to prove my capabilities as an engineer because they had already decided
Yeah.
I had degrees in journalism and art history. What did I know about engineering? It didn't matter how I did as an engineering student to them, and I did well.
Yeah.
They didn't care. They made their decision about me, and pretty much made it happen. And while I'm making it sound like these are horrible people, I let it happen, and
Yeah.
I let them get into my head and convince me that I wasn't really as capable as I was. So
Mm.
it was a really toxic situation. And I said to my husband, I just have to quit. And he was like, well, no, you invested all that time studying engineering. Why would you quit now? Um,
Hmm.
and if it weren't for him, I don't think I would have kept going. Although at the time I was really mad at him, but
Other than threatening a lawsuit and working your dress code around, dress all around the way the dress code, how on earth did you manage that, navigating that just day to day, the interactions with coworkers, and eventually, because you didn't stop being an engineer, how did
I
you
did.
kind of get yourself out of that?
So one of the big things, and again, this is the reason I'm where I am now. One of the big things that I did was I thought I need to do something that feels like I'm doing some good.
Hmm.
And I got involved in the professional organization, American Water Works Association, for um, people who work in the drinking water industry, whether they're utility managers or engineers or whatever. And at the time, they had a charitable branch called Water for People. And I thought, okay, well, I'll get involved in Water for People. And found out that, at least at the Wisconsin level where I lived, it was primarily a fundraising thing. And I thought, this is silly that you've got a bunch of engineers who already are kind of awkward people whose job is just to raise money to help
Hmm.
people when we have all this knowledge. And so I really spearheaded a drive towards contributing kind of professionally. And it led to an opportunity in, oh, it was like 2004, I think, a couple of years um, after I started engineering, where I got on a plane and went to Guatemala to work with Water for People's field officers. And that was where I started meeting people from just completely different experiences, completely different worldviews. Yeah, and I got a sense of how the whole process of development engineering works, humanitarian engineering works, and found that for the communities that I was visiting anyway, it didn't work real well.
Hmm.
So suddenly there's kind of something to do,
Yeah,
some value to bring, and that became kind of my passion for a while.
sure. And we're definitely going to come back to that very
Yep,
hard. But I
yep.
want to, as well, before we do that, uh, so after working at a couple of different civil engineering firms, you started lecturing at University of Illinois.
Hmm.
How did you find your way back? What did that look like?
Yeah, that was actually because of these experiences
Okay.
international. Yeah. Um, so I do want to say I did escape that very bad situation and found
Good.
myself in another engineering firm where
Hmm.
I actually became best friends with my boss, and it was one of these collaborative experiences. And I realized I allowed myself to realize I am an engineer and I know what I'm doing. I'm actually
That's
capable
good.
of. So that helped a
Thank you for
lot.
adding that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and that firm actually encouraged me to get more involved in this international work too, because they saw the value of it in that I came back very energized and with new ideas that I picked up in the field. And um, so that really kind of blossomed that international work. And I ended up, uh, this is going to really make me sound like a troublemaker, but I ended up convincing the Wisconsin section of AWWA to leave Water for People because of that, fundraising focus and not such great outcomes. And we created
hmm,
our own statewide organization to do work more effectively internationally. Okay, so that gave me the reputation of somebody who is trying to do something a little more thoughtful than had.
sure.
That's what led me back to the University of Illinois. So I was starting to get recruited to work on other projects because the projects that we were doing in this new organization seemed to have a lot more value, a lot more sustainability. And I was contacted by the engineers, a brand new organization at the University of Illinois, Engineers Without Borders, which did not exist when I was a student here. It was founded a few
Hmm.
years later. They were working on a project in Nigeria and they were having some trouble with it. And they didn't have any professional guidance because Engineers Without Borders didn't require that at the time.
Hmm.
Um, but they had heard about me through an alumni publication and wondered if I would be willing to consult with them. One thing led to another. I traveled with them a couple of times. And that brought word back through some graduate students who were also traveling that there was this new way of thinking about the work. An assistant dean in the College of Engineering asked me if I'd be willing to teach that, which I found wildly funny and incredibly flattering. It's like, I only have undergraduate degrees.
Hmm.
And he's like, yeah, that's okay. But the flip side of that is, but of course we can't pay you. um, so yeah, so I volunteered to teach a course. We called it Honduras Water Project, and we identified through one of the organizations. After I started this organization in Wisconsin, some other states followed suit and started their own similar organizations. We sort of created this loose alliance. And one of the organizations in Florida wanted to work in Honduras. So they sponsored a project. We spent a year with my students investigating the community and the project, and then designing it, and then Rotary International built it.
Nice.
And it was a really cool course. Yeah,
That's awesome.
yeah,
I'm jealous that that's not still there, unfortunately. I can't take that.
yeah. Well, we ran it for about 7 years. It
Okay.
actually it stopped during COVID, and then after COVID, I put it back up, but nobody knew what it was by that point because it was 2, 3 years later. And
Hmm.
so people didn't enroll. And I was teaching some other courses at that point and, a little more refined. So, well, maybe its day is done. So we've moved on
Okay.
to a different approach. But yeah, yeah. So we did 7 different projects in Guatemala plus one no, in Honduras plus one in Guatemala through this course, all of which got built. except for
Nice.
one, but that's an outlier story of its own. So,
Okay, got it. So you're lecturing at Illinois, you're
mhm.
not getting paid, you're leading this really incredible course, and you decide to get your master's and your PhD. What
Well, no,
lead?
actually, the
Okay.
University of Illinois comes back to me and says, "This course is really cool. How'd you like to come work full time?"
Very
And
nice.
I'm like, well, I'm an engineer. What would I do? I wouldn't be engineering anymore. I'd be teaching. And it wasn't a research position. It wasn't a, faculty position in the tenure track concept. It was come in and be a teaching associate. I was like, well, that sounds kind of fun.
Hmm.
I talked with my husband, who is from Wisconsin, and said, "How'd you like to move back to Illinois?" Which is like, Wisconsin people are not as fond of Illinois as Illinois people are of Wisconsin. I'll say that. But he was game. He ended up taking a job at the university as well, and we moved back here. And I started teaching in the freshman program, the freshman engineering experience program, as well as this Honduras water project. Then I started looking around and saying, crap, everybody around me has PhDs, and I've just got a bunch of bachelors. I feel really, really inferior here. I should do something about this. So that's why I started taking courses towards my master's degree in civil engineering.
So I want to tie some stuff together. How did the master's and the PhD program, plus what you've already been noticing in when you're doing your the humanitarian engineering work, how did that kind of culminate to what you do now? Tell me about your research focused and all of that, how you came about it.
I started doing the research the moment I got here, even though
Okay.
even before I started doing the master's degree. Um, and I suppose you could argue I was doing the research before then because this is maybe the newspaper reporter in me. From the first time I traveled, I took copious notes about what I saw, what what worked, what didn't, what I learned. Um, and I have all those journals. And I kept doing that as my opportunities expanded to work in different places through, the university in this teaching role. Um, and so I started to think I need to be able to explain it in scholarly terms. And that's where the master's degree came in. The idea being that in everything I saw, I recognized that the engineers weren't focusing on the conditions of the user. They were focusing on their own knowledge. And especially in humanitarian engineering with volunteers who work professionally in the United States, we already are, consultants are trained, and I can remember being told, when you talk to a client, you have every answer. Even if you don't have the answer, you let them think you have every answer. And I argued with my first boss about that and said, that's disingenuous and they're going to see through it. And he said, no, you are the expert. You've got to always be the expert. That was another place where I kind of broke the rules in that place because I thought that was silly. I thought it was much more important to say, what do you think, than
Yeah.
to insist on my own way of thinking. Um, so contextual engineering does just that. It asks the user, what do you think? And more importantly, it doesn't ask the user, what do you want? It spends time with the user to understand what the user wants. Not to say the user is going to mislead anybody, but sometimes the user population, first off, it's very heterogeneous. So you're working with a lot of different people. You've got to capture a range of understanding. And you've also got to overcome a lot of the conditions that just lay there when somebody from the outside comes in with money.
Hmm.
I can tell you, I can go anywhere in the world and say, I've got money to fix your water system. How's your water system? And the response is going to be, our water system needs to be fixed. If I go
Hmm.
to those same places and say, I've got a lot of money and I want to do something that's important for you, what do you need the most? They may tell me 20 different things. And it may or may not be water. But by me coming in and asking the question, do you want this?
Hmm.
I've already created the answer. all of this stuff, and it's, it's a combination of sociology, psychology. Um, it reminds me a lot of my art history degree, in that it draws in so many different things that you have to think about to get
Yeah.
to the right answer. Um, that I thought, this is something engineers were just not taught to think that way. So how do we
Yeah.
make this approachable? So that's what I wanted to work on in my master's degree. Unfortunately, nobody was particularly excited about that and thought it was just a mental exercise because it didn't square with the idea of engineering at the time. Um, because engineering should just be doing the math and science, right?
Hmm.
And I made the argument and continue to make the argument that once you learn how to do math, you can do the math. Anybody can do the math. What you have to do is figure out whether you're doing the right math for the right purpose. And
Hmm.
that takes that preparation time to understand who you're working for. Um, so that's where it turned into a scholarly activity for me.
All right. And I'm going to take a second, if you don't mind, to
Mhm.
toot your own horn for you here. I just want to say that, I mean, you invented the term contextual engineering. You are as far as I know, the forefront researcher in this field of contextual engineering and making humanitarian work better. And I remember as well, you told me a story about how last time we spoke about how exactly you like what your moment was of this is a real problem.
Oh,
Would you mind telling that again? It sticks with me.
the moment that this became apparent to me that we needed to think about who we were working with rather than what we can do for people
Hmm.
was it was on my first trip. And it was on that trip with Water for People. And we were working for a community in rural Guatemala. They were, and this was a community that was supported by a local Catholic mission,
Hmm.
because most of the residents there, and they're mostly family units, most of the residents there were either refugees from mudslides that had happened the year before and had wiped out entire villages um, in the mountains. And a lot of people just barely escaped with their lives and nothing else. So a lot of those people came to this village, and also people who worked for the coffee fincas, the coffee plantations, which are owned predominantly by Europeans in Guatemala. And the European owners essentially create an indentured servitude for indigenous people who get jobs and housing on those coffee plantations. But as they work there to get the money to feed their families and everything, they're also racking up debts on their houses. So you can never get away. So
Yeah.
by the time people are exhausted working in these coffee plantations as indigenous people, um, essentially they have to flee with their lives, and they become refugees. And it's a very uncomfortable situation. What I probably didn't tell you last time is this community was built on a former coffee plantation, and so
Mm.
the original houses in this community were finca houses, and the people of the community refused to live in them because
Mm.
of the identification of houses on a finca. So
Yeah.
most of them carried their houses up the mountainside, a couple of planks at a time on their shoulders. And there were two levels. There was a main level of the community on a plateau halfway up the mountain and another one up at the top. And they obtained their water from a spring that was around the main level area, but a little bit lower. And it was piped over to a central point in that main area, and people could go and collect water there. So that was the project that Water for People was working on at the time, and we were working with them. And we were going around talking to people in the community, and we stopped at one particular house. And I still have the photograph that I had taken of this family. It was a woman who, at the time, I thought she was an older woman. She was probably younger than me at the time, but she was well weathered. She had had a rugged life. She lived in her house with um, countless children. I forget how many. It was like 6 or 8 children.
Mm.
Her husband, her mother, all lived in this one room house. And when I say house, essentially all it is planks that are nailed together to make a room. Um, Dirt floor, the whole bit. And I wanted to talk with her a little bit about what this project meant. And she was, as everybody in the community, was Quechua, which is a dialect of the ancient Mayan civilization. So there's 20 some different dialects, different sects of Mayans in Guatemala, each of whom has their own language, their own identity, their own dress, their own traditions and everything. And she was Quechua, which is one of the larger sects. She didn't speak Spanish. I don't speak Spanish, so I had to have a translator from English to Spanish. And then the community had a Spanish to Quechua translator with us as well.
Hmm.
So I asked her, I was talking with her and she was explaining who lived in the house and everything and where she got her water. And I said, so how's your life going to change now that you have, this water coming into town? What are you going to be able to do? What's going to be different? And the Spanish translator translated it over to the other translator, who looked puzzled for a few seconds, and the two started speaking in Spanish. And then the guy talked to her, this woman in Quechua for a second, and kind of went back, and they started arguing. And everybody's kind of trying to figure, and I'm like, get this, whoa, what's going on here?
Hmm.
And finally, the Spanish to English translator turns to me and says, well, we're having trouble figuring out how to translate because there's no conditionals in the Quechua language. People cannot think about what could be or what might be or what will be in the future because linguistically they don't have a way of expressing it. And so they don't think about what they could have that they don't have. And
Wow.
to me, that was incredibly mind blowing to think that, and it made me feel very, very foolish too, because I'm like, okay, hoping she's going to say, oh, I'm going to be more economically productive and I'm going to be earning money and we're going to live in a bigger house, all these things. When in fact, the thought process doesn't even exist for people. And it's not,
Yeah.
it'd be easy to say, well, that's because they haven't advanced far enough to think into the future. But that's not the case at all. It's just a different level of existence, a different
Yeah.
type of existence. And once I started processing this, and I have notes in my journal about just being totally blown away by this, I realized how important it is for me to work with the community, understanding that community from their perspective.
Yeah.
Because if I go there and I design something with the intent of making a change and they don't have the capability of identifying how that change is going to have an impact, they want something that's reliable. They want something that's solid and graspable. And
Hmm.
I'm just going to be throwing this incredible complication into their lives. So that was the moment for me where it was like, oh wow, we really need to think about what we're doing when we go into these places rather than just telling people to listen to us and do what we tell them.
Wow. That is incredibly impactful. And thank you very much for sharing that. I feel like it adds as well just some more context about how important your research is as well, which I want was important to me to add in. And
Mm.
also too, you were talking about the indentured servitude model that they have with those coffee plantations. It reminds me a lot about American sharecropping after the end of slavery. So it's
Yep,
it helps to pull that parallel. So thank you.
yep.
Okay. So you've talked about this a little bit, or a lot of it, actually. You've kind of been tying into your conversation, but I want to address it really directly here.
Mhm.
How has your educational background and early career in journalism and also art history affected your research career and how you approach it?
I couldn't be doing what I'm doing now if I didn't have all those experiences.
Mm,
Um, and it's funny because probably about once a month somebody says to me, wow, what a weird change, from newspaper reporting to engineering, so different.
mm, mhm,
Um, and it reminds me of not too long after I started in engineering school, you know, way back when. I had been invited to speak at a conference of investigative reporters by another investigative reporter I knew. And I was talking about how, to me, the progression to engineering from journalism makes perfect sense because I'm doing the same thing, I'm just using a different language.
yeah.
That in journalism, I'm trying to identify a problem and address a problem using observations and hopefully decent writing, and clarity of writing. Where in engineering, I'm trying to identify a problem and address a problem using math and science. And I said that, and one of the other um, investigative reporters on the panel started cracking jokes about, if you want to be diving into issues and you don't know how to do it, well, just become an engineer or something. I mean, it was very insulting. It was as though, well, if you can't do this, just do that, right?
Yeah.
And then when I was working at this first engineering firm, I have no doubt that people were saying, well, she couldn't be an engineer because she's a writer. And oftentimes I
Mm.
would put on like writing reports and things like that. Like the first internship I applied for as an engineering student, this engineering firm accepted me and then told me they were going to have me work in their marketing department.
Mm.
And so I refused. Okay. So
Hmm.
all of this is to say, people saw this divide, and people do see a divide. And even when my kids were in school, I heard, track down the technical side or the humanities side, right?
Hmm.
It happens. We are predisposed to believing you can do one or the other.
Hmm.
I argue that there is no one or the other, that they're the same thing. We just learn different languages to do them.
Hmm.
And a really good engineer, we actually have a researcher who's kind of looking at this right now, although I'm not sure he knows that this is what I'm my secret agenda, um,
Hmm.
to see if engineers do apply some of the tactics, techniques that we use as newspaper reporters to learn things without
Hmm.
realizing it. Um, because I think a good engineer has to have that investigative capability, has to know how to ask questions, has to know how to
Hmm.
talk to people. Um, and engineers are better at talking to people than we give ourselves credit for. We fall into, we all buy into the stereotype of extroverted engineers look at the other person's shoes type thing. Um, we're indoctrinated into that. Um,
Hmm.
but I personally believe that I couldn't do what I do now if I didn't have that experience to open up my awareness of the fact that this is what an engineer should and has to be doing.
Yeah.
So to me, it's a natural progression, a natural flow. Even the art history degree, and I didn't mention when I was doing the journalism degree, it seemed like it was a little bit too applied to me, that I was learning a skill or a trade and not
Mm.
knowledge. And so I added the second degree on for art history purely as a knowledge degree, because I just
Hmm.
wanted to understand things. And in art history, you get political science, you get comparative religions, you get well, I mean, you just get a little of everything. Um, so that degree I use all the time. Being a stay-at-home mom has been one of the best things I did for my engineering degree, especially what I do now, because
Hmm.
I learned empathy. I learned how to understand somebody's needs and how to motivate, and things like that. So I think everything I've done, even though it looks like this weird sinuous path that makes no sense, is right on target to do what I do now.
Wow. What a way to tie it together there. That's awesome. Uh, Not to crack a joke, but do you think that we might be able to attribute our separation of humanities versus technical as a linguistic gap for us in English?
Absolutely, absolutely.
All right.
One of the freshman classes I taught, for one of our activities, I would ask the students to invent a new language that would allow people to convey engineering concepts uh, more easily. And it's so fun to watch what people come up with. It's so fun. Yeah.
That's really cool. All right, getting back to your path as a lecturer and getting your master's, your PhD at Illinois, uh, you're now a full-fledged professor. Can you tell me? No, please dive into that.
Actually not.
Okay, okay.
Actually not. So I'm gonna, remind you that I followed a very non-traditional path to
Hmm.
academia.
Of
Uh,
course.
I have never been able to break through the tenure track role.
Sure. Okay.
I'm a specialized faculty. I'm a teaching professor, which is kind of funny considering that I've got one of the largest research groups, certainly in my department, if not in the engineering college.
Hmm.
But I am a teaching professor,
Okay.
and that's my role officially.
Got it. All right. Sorry, forgive me. I'm not, there's a whole lot of bureaucracy of the
And
education that I do not understand.
you know what? You consider yourself fortunate because it is a lot of bureaucracy and it's absolutely irrelevant to students. But
Hmm.
for faculty, we look at each other and go,
Mm.
you're an associate and you're how old? Like you're not a full, that sort of thing. So yeah, we we,
Okay.
we notice these things,
Okay.
unfortunately.
Okay. So could you tell me about your current role as a teaching professor and how you're bringing your research as a teaching professor to the classroom today, both within the Department of Agriculture and Biological Engineering, and then
Yeah,
also now with the Illinois College of Medicine? And I know there's a whole lot of different moving parts as well, but
yes,
could you
there
dive
are.
into it a little bit?
Yeah. Yeah, I'll give you the TLDR version of it. Um,
Okay.
so I do work. My primary appointment is in the Illinois College of Medicine. I've been there a year and a half, um, which I find um, gratifying and kind of amusing because my secondary appointment is in the College of Agricultural and Biological Engineering. And honestly, I know nothing about medicine or agriculture. So there's a bit of an irony there. Um, but again, it somehow makes sense. So I had been working as a research scientist in the
Hmm.
Applied Research Institute for a couple of years before I moved over to the College of Medicine, in large part because um, I really like teaching, and it was getting harder and harder in the Research Institute to carve out time to teach.
Hmm.
It was not an expected role for a research scientist, and I had to really fight for that. And you get tired of fighting for it. So I had the opportunity to teach again. And in the College of Medicine, I teach problem-based learning courses. And then I'm what's called an engineering partner because it's an engineering-based medical school. So I work with second and third year medical students while they're on their clinical rotations to look at engineering innovations within the family practice clinical rotation, which I love because it gives me a chance to kind of inject this notion that innovation doesn't mean bigger, faster, stronger. It means more effective, more
Hmm.
appropriate. Sometimes working with what you got is going to be better. And it's been a lot of fun to work with med students that way. Um, so I'm doing that. I'm also maintaining my research group in ag and bioengineering, and I'm teaching my contextual engineering course there as well as the department's capstone course, which again feeds very much into my own philosophy of to be a good engineer, you have to understand who you're engineering for, and so that's very much a part of that. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
And that's where you are right now, to kind of
for the
put
moment, yeah.
that. Yeah, at the moment. Yeah, of course. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Who knows
Um,
where the current is going to flow next?
and that's
I'm,
awesome. That's
I'm,
great.
I'm really happy with where I am right now. And it's funny because I was thinking about this not too long ago. I loved being a newspaper reporter, but there were things about it I didn't love,
Hmm.
and it wore on me. Um, I reached a point of loving being a consulting engineer, but same thing. There were things I didn't
Hmm.
love about it. I've been at the University of Illinois 11 years now, and I can honestly say there's nothing about it that's wearing on me.
That's
There are
awesome.
the day-to-day frustrations, but
Mhm.
maybe for the first time in my life over the last 10 years, I can say this is where I needed to be.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's awesome. All right. Okay, so over the course of your career, you have volunteered in various leadership positions with organizations, and you're talking about this earlier, like American Water Works Association, Engineers Without Borders USA, and the Global FEW Hub Alliance. How have these various positions influenced your career?
Each one of these organizations, so I'm going to take them separately, okay? Because
Okay.
in ways, American Water Works Association is practicing water professionals.
Mm-hmm.
So they are interested in scholarship, but that's not their mission. They have
Hmm.
they have connections to scholarship, they support scholarship, but they are practitioners. And to me, it's really important to have had that experience and to maintain that experience. I still stay in contact with that organization because, especially as contextual engineering has broadened out beyond just non-industrial to communities in the United States, I need to understand what people are doing on the ground now. Um,
Hmm.
if I don't know what the current regulations are, what the current practices are, what how utilities are interacting with engineers, down to things like, are they hiring engineers based on skill or how much they're going to charge? Those are the sort of things you need to know to understand context.
Hmm.
So being involved with professional organizations like AWWA is critically important for that. Global Q Hub Alliance, that's a different one because that's one that came out of my work rather
Hmm.
than feeding into it, but it's a cyclical thing. So I had the good fortune of coming in contact with a number of people on North America, South America, African continent, European continent, who are interested in place-based knowledge. And we all, as we were talking, agreed that we need to do something to support those who have this knowledge, um, to essentially curate it, but not extract it.
Hmm.
And this is something that we're working on because we want to act as a repository and a support for knowledge holders, but not at the cost of them losing rights to that knowledge. So we're trying to build this alliance so that we can provide scientific research to the knowledge holders and then provide them support to disseminate or retain that knowledge as they choose. Um, so that kind of feeds into my own work in that it provides me just great access to research opportunities in place-based knowledge and appropriate technologies, which is invaluable. Plus, I get to work with scholars and researchers from around the world who have a similar interest, which is just incredible because then you realize how different traditions of engineering shift from place to place, and
Hmm.
how we approach things differently. Um, and then what was the other one you mentioned?
Engineers Without Borders.
Engineers Without Borders. I like that one. So Engineers Without Borders is a good opportunity to see who's coming up. You know what I mean?
Okay.
What's the thought process of each generation as it moves forward? What's
Hmm.
important to students? And at the same time, I've been fortunate enough to be able to provide some insight from our own research to EWB USA, um,
Hmm.
so that they can be more thoughtful in some of their processes. I watched EWB um, go from a very small, very idealistic idea to a very large organization that um, had a lot of things to wrangle and probably way more than they had the capability of managing in terms
Hmm.
of oversight of design, team safety, all those things. So, and they've been working really hard to bring all that stuff together. It's a nice opportunity for me to see how people in the United States are thinking, to see what sort of things teams are doing, and to have a little influence.
Would you mind giving a little context on Engineers Without Borders, what
What
they
it
do?
is. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Engineers Without Borders is an organization that started, I think, around 2003 or 2004.
Okay.
Started in Colorado with Bernard Amadei, was the scholar who founded this, with the intent of providing opportunities to essentially do what I was doing when I was working as a professional engineer, to go to places that aren't being served by anybody else and provide engineering support, infrastructure support. Um, they have student chapters, they have professional chapters. Most of the professional chapters that I've encountered, and I don't know if this is always the case, have been alumni of student chapters who want to keep doing the same thing. Um, it has to some degree struggled from that idealism of I'm going to go out and save the world and do good and everything. And it's had some challenges, but at the same time, it's really taken on, and it's part of a global network of Engineers Without Borders. The United States started one. United Kingdom has one that's a little differently managed, but same intent. Canada, Australia. I actually was a part of creating one in Ecuador. So Engineers Without Borders, the idea is volunteers. The importance of the projects is exposing people to who they're working for in a thoughtful way. And I think that's where, kind of my engagement with the organization has been mutually beneficial.
Yeah, nice. So you're at a point now where you travel all over the world, share your research, lead workshops and classes, doing engineering assessments in rural communities, and you have fundamentally changed the way that aid organizations do humanitarian engineering work. What would Anne, fresh out of her undergraduate degree at Boston University in art history and journalism, think if she saw you today?
She would say, what the hell? Wait a second. Um, it's a great question. I will admit that engineering was not unfamiliar to me when I was
hmm
all in on journalism. My father was an engineer. My grandfather was an engineer on the Panama Canal. My brother was a chemical engineer. For some reason, when I went to Boston University in journalism, every roommate I ever had was an engineering student. I don't know why. It was like, okay, fate was always knocking on my door and saying, hey, 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 hey.
hmm
And I was ignoring it for a long time because I wanted to be a writer. Um, Honestly, now I think I, if I were looking at me now, back then, I would say, yeah, yeah,
It's natural.
yeah, this had to happen. It was there. It was there. Um, I may have been denying it. I may have claimed that I wasn't a good science math person in college, but I kind of knew better. And this is really cool. I think I would have been incredibly proud of myself.
That's awesome. That's really awesome. Uh, to kind of wrap up, this is the last question I have for you. What is one piece of advice that you would give to someone considering a career change?
Don't be scared to change.
Okay.
It's a really easy one. And going back to where we started talking, um, the biggest impediment I had to going back to college in engineering was my own mind. It was, what are people going to think of me? And that, that first day when somebody said I couldn't pick up the packet, that the student had to pick it up themselves. Um,
Mm,
I I could have let that do me in right there. I really could have. Um, but I think I don't know if it's something my parents gave me or something that's just intrinsic, but I was like, no, I'm going to do this. And I think that anybody, if you feel like there's a change looming, you, anybody can do it. You just need to convince yourself that you're not going to get in your own way.
yeah.
I had a friend years ago who I met as a reporter because I wrote the story about her. She graduated from Bradley University in her early 60s with a degree in social work. And before then, she had been a stay-at-home mom. And before that, she was a radio actress in the 1940s.
Hmm.
And I got to know her, and we actually became very good friends, even though I was in my early 20s and she was in her mid 60s. Um, and she really proved to me that it doesn't matter what age you are or what you think your capabilities are. If you make up your mind to do something, just go ahead and do it.
That's really awesome. Thank you for finishing us off with that. Thank you so much for this incredible interview. Thank you so much to your dog for staying quiet. But it's truly been a pleasure talking with you. I really appreciate all of your insight and everything that you've given. Actually though, before we go, is there anywhere, if people are interested about the type of work that you're doing now, is there anywhere you'd recommend pointing them in the direction of?
Absolutely. We have our research group has a website.
Hmm.
It's contextual.engineering.illinois.edu.
Okay.
There's also a website for the Global Few Hub Alliance, which is a consortium of um, national continental hubs looking at place-based knowledge to adapt to climate change in the areas of food,
Okay.
energy, water. And that's global.few.org, I believe.
I will add those to the description of the episode. Uh, Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much again.
Great to talk with you.
If you have any comments, questions, feedback, or suggestions for who I should talk to next, shoot me an email at nick@reroutedpod.com. The address and links to our website and socials can be found in the description below. Stay tuned for future releases every Wednesday. This is Nicholas Karamanian. I hope you enjoyed the show.